I'm Ranger Dave, as Ranger Carol said, and I'm a park ranger here at Channel Islands National Park, and I'm coming to you live today from Anacapa Island. So first of all, since I can hear you and we're interactive, let me hear all of you in the third grade there wave and give me a big shout out hello and see if I can hear you all the way across the ocean. Excellent. Way to go. And so today we're going to be looking at one of 5 islands in this national park. It's one of 8 islands offshore, and that island is Anacapa Island. When you first looked on the screen, were you seeing a lighthouse? And that's the Anacapa Island Lighthouse. And from where you all live, if you're down by the beach at nighttime and it's not too foggy like last night, you can actually see that light when it blinks every 10 seconds or so. And you can see that light out here on Anacapa Island. So we're about 14 miles across the ocean from all of you. And today, we're not just going to show you Anacapa Island and tell you all about the island itself, but we're going to focus on one particular aspect of this island and the Channel Islands, and it's something that occurred in the past, but also has a link to the present. So does anyone want to take a guess? And Ranger Carol, maybe we can have a couple kids guess. Maybe you've prepared them already about what it is we're going to look at today on Anacapa Island.
Going to look at the islands or the animals there.
Well, we're going to look at some animals, and we have a real exciting animal to show you very soon. In fact, while we're talking about it, maybe our cameraman Joe, if you bear with us, we're going to make a big motion with the camera, and we're going to work our way down to the shoreline because we're up on top of a cliff, and we're going to show you one of the biggest animals out here on Anacapa Island. So that's one of the things we're going to show you, but let's maybe take one more guess. And this relates to, again, the history of the island, what we're going to be focusing on today.
Chumash.
The Chumash, that's right. And so there were people who lived on this island, lived on the Channel Islands for thousands of years, and they have a very interesting story that I know you've been learning about a little bit. So we're going to kind of show you the place and tell you about the people and give you a chance to ask us questions about them. And Joe, my cameraman, is telling me that we are now focused in on those big animals that do tie in to the Chumash and their lives on this island. So what animals are we looking at right now? Sea lions! Sea lions. Hey, now you guys sound really excited. And so that means that we're doing our job right. And these animals are California sea lions. And you see some of them are swimming and some of them are lying out in the sun. And can you see that?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to use them to demonstrate something about this national park. Our national park, your national park, Channel Islands, is half land and half water. Half of the park is ocean, and these animals need both sides of the park, the water and the land, in order to survive. So why do you think that is? Maybe Ranger Carol, we can have one of the kids guess as to why these animals need both the land and the water. And there are a lot of answers.
So they can lay their eggs on the land?
Well, the birds would do that. Yeah, we'll see some birds later, and they'll do that. But sea lions are mammals, and so they're not laying their eggs on land. But, you know, when they give birth, when they have their pups, they do that on land. They do use the land for that. So that is a very good answer. Does anyone else have another reason why they would use both?
And I'm going to let Mrs. Hernandez call on a student.
Okay.
They need land and water because if there is no water, their skin gets dry and eventually die.
If there is no water, you'll have to repeat that a little bit louder.
If there's no water and just land, they will die because they have no water and their skin will get too dry,
Their skin would get too dry. You know, you're touching on one of the reasons why we see them laying out in the sun but swimming in the water. And in addition to dryness, it's heat and cold. So when they're too hot, they can go in the cool water and cool off. And when they're too cold for being in the water, they can come lie out in the warm sun, and then they can get warm again. So I'm guessing that since your class and your school is close to the ocean, that if I ask the question, how many of you go to the beach in the summertime, go ahead and raise your hand if you go to the beach in the summertime. And Ms. Hernandez, I'll bet you, is almost everybody raising their hand?
Yeah.
Yep.
I see
And
a couple that aren't raising their hand.
okay, because not everybody likes the beach or gets to go, but most of us do. And when you're at the beach, we do the same thing. We go in the water for a while, and then we get cold, and we go lay out on our towels. And so these sea lions are doing very similar things to what we do, and it also ties into the same needs that Chumash had, which we'll talk about in a minute. Let's maybe take Ms. Hernandez one more guess as to why the seals and sea lions use both the land and the water.
All right, we're going to let our birthday girl, Haley, answer.
Birthday girl. All right, Haley, happy birthday.
So the water is for them to get a drink, and then they could find their food.
Find their food. Very good, Haley. On your birthday, you came up with a great answer because I was hoping someone would say food. And so they get their food. They eat fish mostly, and that lives in the ocean, of course. So here's an animal that lives on the island. They actually get protection on the island from the cold and from things like sharks or predators. They need the ocean to cool off and to find their food, and so they use both worlds. But let's think about those things that they need. Food, protection, shelter, people said water, and they don't need clothing because they are already born in their fur. But think about the Chumash and what needs the Chumash had in order to survive out here on the Channel Islands, and even the Chumash who lived on the mainland. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk today about how the Chumash who lived on the islands provided for those same needs that the seals and sea lions have, that you and I have, and we'll do some comparison. But before we do that, because we are on an island and we've never been connected to the mainland, we're far out in the ocean, our cameraman Joe is going to do a big sweeping pan. So again, bear with us while the camera moves. It's going to be a little bit fast. And he's going to aim that camera off the island towards the open ocean just to give you a feel of how far we are. There's no land when we look off to the south. And imagine being a Chumash Indian and living out here, and you're cut off from people from other islands, from people from the mainland. And Joe, if you can stop for just a second right there, we're pointed right out to the ocean, and we're pointed to the south. And this will be just kind of a fun question, but Ms. Hernandez, perhaps one of the students wants to guess what the next major chunk of land or landmass or continent is. If you just went in a boat the direction the camera's facing, what would be the next land you would see?
Alyssa, what do you think? Where would we go? You don't know? Who can guess? Where would we land if we kept going? Alex?
Santa Cruz Island.
Santa Cruz Island is a very good guess because that is the next land, the closest land to us, but that's out to the west, the direction we're going to be facing in a minute. But looking to the south, out to the open ocean, there are no more islands directly south of us. So let's take maybe one more guess.
What do you think?
Where we are.
Where you are is a great guess too, because when you look at the beach on a clear day, you can see this island, but that's behind us, so that's to the north. I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of where we are. And so we'll do one more try, Ms. Hernandez, and I don't think anybody will guess this because it's a very surprising answer.
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, that's a good guess. That's to the north, up the coast. So you've guessed Santa Cruz Island, Santa Barbara, where you are in Camarillo, and so you guys have guessed 3 of the 4 directions. And the reason why no one guessed what's to the south is because you can't see any land to the south. If you went on a boat that direction, the next land you would come to is called Antarctica. And I think you all know Antarctica. That's where the South Pole is. Imagine
Yes.
how far that is out to sea.
Wow.
Isn't that a long way?
You guys think that's a long way?
Yeah. Now, if we had a really good zoom on our camera, we would show you a penguin, but we don't have a really good zoom like that. It doesn't exist. So we are going to make our way. Joe's continuing to pan towards the west, and we're going to give him time to do that. And when he does get over to the west, Joe, if you can find right on that rock there, there's the closest thing we have to a penguin here today. Maybe you can zoom way in on that. And when you guys in the class see the animal that we're looking for, tell me when we have it. I'm challenging our cameraman a little, so bear with us as he moves. What do you see?
Are you sure that's a puffin?
Seagull. Who said seagull? All right. Yeah, that's a seagull. It's called a western gull. And western gulls, even though we see these at the beach, out here on the island, they use the isolated and safe place. There are very few predators here, things that will hurt them, and so they nest out here. So this is a really big spot for these birds to lay their eggs and their nests, and that's going on right now. So that's an exciting thing happening on Anacapa today, and you can actually come out here on a boat. Almost every day there are boats here, and you can see that activity. We don't want to disturb their nests, so we're not going to go in there because that would do damage to them. And we are the National Park Service, and we want to take care of the wildlife out here. But I do have, and I'll show you if I can find them in here, since I'm kind of ad-libbing on this a little bit, an example of what one of their eggs looks like. And Joe, are you able to pan in on that? Or zoom in? Do you guys see that? Now, this is not a real egg because I don't, again, want to hurt the animals that are nesting here, and I don't want to damage the eggs. But right now, this is what their egg looks like, and it's camouflaged. It's spotted so that it blends in, and it takes about a month, and then these eggs that are laid out here will hatch, and this is where the seagulls come from. So when you're at the beach and you see the seagulls flying around, almost certainly those birds in this area were born right here on Anacapa Island. So a very special place. Now, the Chumash who lived out here, do you think they would have had a use for these eggs?
Yes.
And this is an easy question. What would they use the eggs for? For eggs, right. That's right. To eat. And so we were talking about the seals and sea lions and how they need food and they eat fish. And the Chumash who lived here also needed food. And one source of food at a certain time of year here would be gull eggs. We don't eat these now because we want to protect the gulls here. So we can go where? Where do we buy our eggs?
Store.
At the store. And so that leads me into the next part of our show. And we're going to look, I have a basket here. And Joe, is this on camera? And this basket is the kind that the Chumash Indians would have used. And we have some props and things in here that are symbolic of things that Chumash used. And so we're going to look at how did the Chumash on the islands, being this far out in the ocean, provide for things like food and shelter and water and clothing. And I'll see if I have examples here that highlight that. But we can also look at needs that you have and how you get those and compare that to how the Chumash did it. So this will be sort of a fun back and forth. And Ms. Hernandez, let's have some of the students one at a time. We can have people suggest to me things that either they used for survival or that the Chumash used. And let's see what we can find and describe how the Chumash lived on the islands.
Okay, sounds good. They're having fun watching the seagull behind you.
Oh, good.
That's why they were laughing.
Those two seagulls, when we're setting up out here, they come walking up and they're all curious, what are those guys doing? And every time they watch us, and we're like the big show to them. So
They like the one that's right behind you on the right by the basket that's walking there. Well, he's walking away now, but
oh yeah, walking away right now. And it looks like he's almost on the basket. So those two gulls, they're friends of ours. They're getting to be, and they're very curious. So, and I think Joe's zooming in on them now. And while he's showing you that, does anyone want to maybe start to give me some ideas of things? And you could ask me even things that the seagulls need to survive. and we'll see what we have.
Okay, let's start with Alyssa.
They need food to survive. They need food to survive.
Food, okay, so Alyssa said food. And what do you think these seagulls eat?
Food. Fish.
Fish, just like the sea lions. And one of the reasons why there's so many seagulls and so many sea lions here is that the waters around the island have a lot of fish. There are more fish right here at the island than there are right off the beach on the mainland. And so how do you think having a lot of fish here helped the Chumash?
Michaela.
They need plenty of animal skin for clothing.
Well, he said
Well, animal skin for clothing is good, and I actually have something in my basket that, so this isn't fish, they didn't get their clothing from fish, but some of the other marine mammals, like seals and sea lions, they could use the fur for clothing. And does anybody know, this is just a puppet, but does anyone know what this is?
Aaron.
Skunk.
Aaron said skunk. That's the second time someone guessed skunk. I think my animal looks like a skunk. I also heard someone say beaver, and that's not a bad guess, but this is an otter. And since it's not real, it's kind of hard to tell. But sea otters, during the Chumash time here, we're swimming in the waters here, and their fur is very thick, even thicker than a beaver fur. And beavers were something that people used for clothing on the mainland, but there are no beavers on the Channel Islands, so instead, the Chumash would use otter skin or seals and sea lions to make their clothing. So this is one good example of a difference between even the Chumash on the mainland and the Chumash on the islands. What do you guys use for clothing? Does anybody wear an otter coat?
No.
Nope. How about a seal coat? No. And how do you get your clothing? Where do you get it from? The store. Or if you're like me and not as lucky, you got it from your older brother because he's older and bigger and you really wanted new clothes. But so imagine you're Chumash. You can't just go to the store and buy clothes. You have to go out in the ocean and do what? Hunt. And do you think it would be easy to go swim out in the cold ocean with your spear and hunt an otter, or do you have to have another way to go on the water?
Okay, Julian's going to tell us. He knew.
A canoe
Juliet?
called a tamale.
A tamole, and that's a very good use of the term. Now, a tamole is big and heavy, so I don't have one in my basket, but I do have a model of a tamole, and so this is what a Chumash tamole looks like. It's made of planks of wood, and they use tar. Has anybody been to the beach and gotten some tar on their hands or their feet?
I got it when I went to sit down.
Yeah. One time I got it, and I had it on my hand, and then I touched my other hand, so I had it on both hands, and then I went like this, and I had tar everywhere. And so tar for us, maybe not great, but for the Chumash, they used it for making their boats and sealing their baskets. So they used all the things around them that they could in order to survive. So this boat, the tamole, and we get big waves here, so I always like to go, it goes like this. And they would use this to go out in the ocean to hunt, to get clothing and for food and also for trade. So this is a really good example of one way the island Chumash adapted to living on an island. It's good to have a boat. Joe and I came here today on a boat. If there was no boat, we wouldn't even be able to do a show. So we still have the same needs, even if we use them for a different purpose. You need clothing, we wear clothing, we need a boat to get to the island. It's just a different way of fulfilling the same needs. So that was a good answer. Does anyone else have an idea of other things that the Chumash used in order to survive?
Isabella, nice one.
Abalone shell.
She said abalone.
Abalone shell. I like to call this game Stump Ranger Dave because I'm always waiting for someone to guess something that I don't have in my basket. And so what's your name? Who said abalone shell?
Isabella.
Isabel. Do you think you stumped Ranger Dave?
But Ranger Dave, we do have an abalone shell in our classroom that they.
You do? Guess what? Would I be a very good island ranger if I didn't have an example of an abalone shell to show you? So, I have a feeling you know some of the uses of this shell, but this was good for a lot of different things. So let's have some guesses as to what, and I'm going to turn it over so you can see the other side, what this shell would be used for.
Hey, Lily, what do you think it's used for?
Drinking out of.
She said
Lily
drinking.
says drinking out of. So if I were to put water in here, that'd be good. And you know the holes, I could seal those with tar. And so this is for drinking out of. Okay, how about another guess?
Right?
To dig with.
To dig with. Did you guys read Badger Claws?
Yes, we read Badger Claws.
And so I think in Badger Claws is a pretty cool guy too. How he saved the whole village, and he dug what did he dig to save them? A well. So if he had an abalone shell, that's a really good shovel. And so good answer, and it ties right into the Chumash. There's a lot of abalone when the Chumash lived here on the Channel Islands. So this is where they would get the abalone, and they would trade these in their tamols to the Chumash on the mainland, who could then use it to dig. And the Chumash here used it too. How about maybe one other example of what an abalone shell could be used for?
AJ, what else do you think the abalone shell could be used for? You don't know? JJ?
Getting water out of their boats.
Yeah, it could be a scoop, because you know what? There are Chumash who still come to the islands on tamols. They built tamols that are just like the old ones, and those tamols, some water comes in, and if you get too much water, the boat will sink or it gets too heavy to paddle, and so an abalone shell could scoop out that water. So that's not the answer that we always hear. That one's a really good answer, though. I'm going to start using that when I tell other people. So that's a good one, too. Now our boats have pumps, so we pump the water out, but this was really important for the Chumash. So those are some great examples of things. Let's maybe, Ms. Hernandez, how about one more guess about things the Chumash would use, and we'll see what else is in the basket.
Okay, Kyrie's going to take a guess.
As a bowl.
As a bowl.
As a bowl, yeah, the abalone shell could also be used as a bowl, certainly. So we've seen a lot about tools and clothing and food. What about shelter? Does anybody see any big, Joe, maybe you can pan off to the left here a little bit and let's look a little bit at the island. Does anybody see any big trees or anything that you could use to build a, remember in Badger Claws, they built their huts out of what, branches?
What do they use?
Tule grass.
Tule grass?
And
Uh-huh.
that and plant.
And plants, willow trees. Does anybody see a willow tree in the background?
Yeah.
You do? You see willow trees here?
Are you sure?
No. There's a bush. So we don't have trees on Anacapa. And so if you were living here, you needed to build a house, you had to find a different way. How do you guys all have houses to live in? Do you build your own houses?
No.
Somebody might, but most of us don't. And what are your houses made out of mostly? Wood, bricks, yeah, sometimes even steel and all kinds of things. But if you were Chumash and you lived on the island and you didn't have all of that stuff, that gull's still coming closer to us. What would you use to build your house out of?
Old grass.
What do you see that they could use to build a house out of, Aaron?
Grass. Dead grass.
Dead grass, and that was part of what they would use. But what do you think would make the frame? Can you make a frame of a house out of grass? And I'm giving you a clue here when Joe gets back over to me. Hay. That you could, I suppose, make hay, but they didn't. What I'm holding here, does anyone want to guess what this is? That might be a hard thing to tell from the camera.
Do you know, Noah? No? You want to guess, Aaron?
Bone.
A bone. Yeah, good guess. And I'm going to actually turn it over, and you can see the other side. This is a dolphin rib bone. And, of course, dolphins are whales. They're just very small whales. And there are big whales here, too. And big whales have big rib bones. I don't have a big whale rib bone because I'm pretty strong, but I'm not that strong. It's really heavy. But look at the shape of this and imagine it bigger. and you could use this instead of a willow branch to make the frame of your house. And so the Chumash probably weren't hunting whales, but sometimes a dead whale would wash up on the beach, and they could use all the parts for food and for oil and for rib bones, could make frames for their houses. So this is another adaptation to island life for the Chumash. So far we've seen several really good examples of things like this rib bone that the Chumash could use, and I think we've seen today that they were able to survive for thousands of years out here by using the things they found naturally around them, and also by trading using their tamols with people on other islands and on the mainland. And they actually developed a kind of money using seashells as a trading currency, as money to trade with, and they really thrived and did very well out here. And it was just a little different. They had to exchange items that would be used on the mainland for different kind of items that filled their needs out here. So Ms. Hernandez, how are we doing on time? Do we have a few minutes still, or are we getting near the end?
3 minutes until the bell rings for lunch. So.
How many more?
3.
3 minutes, okay. So very quickly, let's take maybe 2 questions, if anybody has general questions about the island or the Chumash, and then we'll do a wrap-up for you and tie all this into something happening right now in the present time.
AJ, do you have a question? Noah?
Do you know exactly what they use for their knives?
What did the Chumash use for their knives? Yes, I do know, actually. They used rock tools, and on the next island over, Santa Cruz, there's a kind of rock that's like a glass, almost like a quartz, called chert, and they could cut it into blades and use that as cutting tools. And actually, it was such good cutting tool, they would trade those and sell them to other people on the mainland, too. How about one more question?
Your question, Troy?
Do you know what kind of okay, I forgot, sorry. How did they make hammers?
How do they make hammers? You know what? They use rocks for hammers too. There was no metal here and no plastic, and very hard rocks were used. They called them hammer stones, and they would use those rocks, a different kind than the knives, but they would use rocks for hammers. So again, those 2 questions gave great examples of how the Chumash used what was around them to supply their needs. And we've seen today that their needs are no different than ours. They were very resourceful, and they found ways to fulfill those needs. And what I'm going to leave you with is that we've been talking about something that happened in the past, but there are still Chumash people with us today that live on the mainland in our communities, all along this area of coastline, and they still come out to the islands, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes even in tamols, and they're still a part of Anacapa Island and of Channel Islands National Park. And I hope that this helps make what you've learned about in class, the Chumash and the islands, a much more real place. And I hope all of you have a chance to come out here and see this for yourself one day. So thank you very much, Ms. Hernandez, all the kids. Great questions and answers. Ranger Carroll and Mr. Luff, thank you for helping out, and have a good day.